Former New York Met and one of my hometown heroes, Nelson Figueroa, joins the podcast today. He's been at camp. He's going to let us know everything that's going down next on Metcast. Welcome back to Metcast, friends. As always, I am Ray, that is Dan, and Nelson needs no introduction. If you're enjoying this content, do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe button. Let us know what you think down in the comments. We are going to get to a couple of your comments throughout the segment, so be sure to head over to YouTube, leave us a comment over there where we'll be getting to some of your guys' interactions. But Nelson, how's it going? The tan looks great. I'm jealous as all hell as it's 19 degrees here. How's camp? What is the vibe?
Well, it's definitely your typical farmer's tan. So I'll just go a little bit below the leg line. You see, I still have a lot of work to do on that. But it was all work, no play down in Florida, getting an opportunity to cover the Yankees for a few days and then going over to Port St. Lucie. And tell you what, man, the vibes are just like they were when the season ended last year. These guys are very loose. They're very together. They're very complimentary of one another. There's no animosity because there's a new guy in the room who's, a record contract. They were very welcoming to him, and, he fits in with everybody. He seems to be the Pied Piper, and really, with all the pressure that comes with this, he doesn't seem like it's bothering him one bit, all the expectations and everything. And even putting a bullseye on his own back by saying that this is now a Mets town. That New York is now a Mets town. So I got a chance to ask him about that, and he didn't shy away from it. He said the only way to deal with the haters who don't think it's a Mets town is to win. So that's what I plan on doing.
Nelson, we last spoke prior to this signing actually happening, what it would take, who are the Mets going after? Is it going to be Bregman? Are they going to even entertain bringing back Alonso if they're going to pivot to these other guys? What was your initial reaction to the Juan Soto signing? And were you like in awe like we were, as David Stern seemed to be? I mean, he was like, shit, we got Juan Soto. Like, he was even in awe.
No, I think we kind of knew the writing on the wall was the Mets were going to get Juan Soto. That was inevitable. I think one of the things that we've talked about before was when Steve Cohen laid low on Aaron Judge. Wasn't because he didn't have more money than the Yankees. He could have thrown $500 million easily at Aaron Judge if he wanted to really rip the hearts out of Yankee fans. He would have offered him an ungodly amount that he couldn't say no to. But Aaron Judge has always seemed to be the kind that he let it be known that he was all about the pinstripes, the tradition. They gave him the captainship as well, along with the deal. And so Steve Cohen kind of just stayed back and let that happen. Again, if he wanted the headlines, if he wanted to really rip, the hearts out of Yankee fans, I think that was the one he would have went to. But I think he did it because he knew he was going to be 30 years old. And there was a superstar coming up that rumors were that, there was going to be trades for him to move around again. The guy's, 3 teams in 6 years. And the Yankees wanted to be that fourth team or that third team to have an opportunity to put him in pinstripes. And they did. And so that was the one that Cohen wasn't going to let get away because he really didn't have any ties to the Yankees. He wasn't homegrown by the Yankees. And so he was there to do one thing and one thing only, and that was, raise his stock and try and win a World Series. Got them to the big dance, and you could easily say that they don't make the World Series without him. And so I think that's where Steve Cohen said he didn't care what the price was, that he was going to get the young superstar in the game in his prime, which the Mets have never been able to do, especially take him away from the Yankees. It won the headlines. It won the hearts and minds of Mets fans. And then also it won the clubhouse because if you're looking for ways to get better from 2024, OMG was a banger. But when you have Juan Soto out there, you don't need any songs.
Yeah. Nelson, another big bat that we brought back in was Pete Alonso. How do you feel that? Because there was a moment where a lot of Mets fans thought he was going up to Toronto, and that whole thing felt real for a good amount of time. How did you take all of the offseason, and how happy are you that Pete's back?
Yeah, no, I think everybody felt that it was inevitable that these two were going to get back together. This was one of those high school romances that, I'm about to go off to college, I'm moving on. I'm really going to go this time. And it was that way, and it was back and forth in the newspapers saying, that there was interest from other parties and interest from other teams. And then Pete Alonso didn't want to go anywhere else. He was, really wanted to come back, but he wanted the number. The magic number was 30 million to bring him back in a year, and they were able to do it as a 20 million with a $10 million signing bonus. So it helps with the cap a little bit. But I do think that one of the biggest things was they got him on the 1-year deal where he'll get a chance to make right on the year that was his walk year, where he was betting on himself by not taking that big deal that was offered in the Epler regime. That deal, you look back now, and nobody was going to even come close to giving him a deal of that magnitude. Not a single team was matching the Cohen number or wanting to go and then bid with Cohen. So all that matters was that he was going to get Pete back in uniform. Now, if it turns out to be a 3-year deal, it's even better for the Mets because, again, they have one of the most prolific power hitters to be protection for Juan Soto. And I think after playing with Juan Soto and all Pete has wanted, it was a chance to go to the playoffs. He got that taste last year in a Met uniform. I think he's going to want to stay. And if they can rework his contract, which is a possibility, even if he opts out, they rework his contract, they make him a Met for life, and they have their DH. For the foreseeable future, which still gives him some flexibility if he does a little deferment, that they could bring in a guy like Vladimir Guerrero to really set the table.
Nelson, don't tease me like that. See, that's not fair to the fans. That.
I said, well, here's the thing. I said it back when free agency first hit, then the Alonso market, right? Because you're looking at first baseman. All the other first basemen were older than Alonso, so they weren't really comps. When the first one went down, which was Christian Walker, and he got $20 million a year. He got a 3-year deal, $20 million, $20 million a year for 60, 3-year deal and you said, okay, well, he's already going to be in his mid 30s, towards his late 30s when he's done with that contract. And he was the one that was always compared to Pete, right, with the numbers that he was putting up over the last few years. And so you just looked around, and even though Pete had the prolific home run numbers, there's always ways to paint a guy good, bad, or ugly. And it was a shame because it didn't get to that level, but it felt like an arbitration hearing more so than a free agency where you were supposed to covet the player. And the Mets kind of stayed at bay and said, we love the player, but we want him at our price. And so they were able to kind of meet somewhere in the middle. What I did like about the negotiation was that you had Stearns and Cohen fly down to Tampa to look Pete in the eye and let them know the sincerity that they had and explain to him, this is our plan. This is what we're trying to do. So in those plans, I can promise you what I just said, it was kind of shown to him that, look, next year, if Vladimir Guerrero doesn't do his extension now and he goes and becomes a free agent, we know the kind of number that he's looking for. And there's not going to be anybody that can match unless is the Yankees really going to get into a bidding war for Vladimir Guerrero and see which guy comes out on top. Steve Cohen has said, and of course this is always about playing poker, too many long-term contracts are not very good for roster flexibility. But I don't think you really want roster flexibility when you have the production of a Vladimir Guerrero, a Pete Alonso, a Juan Soto, a Francisco Lindor, and hopefully a Brandon Nimmo who gets back to being that kind of hitter that he's been in the past.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you know what's wild? I think he also had to say that, Steve Cohen, because the media's throwing it at him. He can't say, yeah, I love Guerrero. We'll see you in the offseason. But I also think, especially with David Stearns, one thing we are learning with him, and maybe you disagree, but this is my take I get. He is more than willing to give very long-term contracts to guys who are in their 20s. And I'm not talking 29. Vladdy next year will be going into his age 27 season. So giving him a 10-year contract, knowing the last 3 years he might be DHing, but the first 7 you might get some really good value out of that. I think that plays into it. It didn't make sense for the Mets to go out there and give Christian Walker a 4 or 5 year deal when he's already age 30. He's going to his age 34 season. Yeah. I mean, for me, it didn't make sense for them. Pete on a short-term deal, and I believe you even said this last time you were here, it just makes sense. Who was the other fit out there? It wasn't the Dodgers. It's not the Phillies. The Yankees got Goldschmidt pretty much right away, which took him off the market. So Do you believe that? Do you believe they want to stay away from a ton of long-term contracts? But if Vladdy puts up another 940 OPS season, that's going to be 3 out of the last 5 years, 940 plus with 1,000 OPS in that 1 year. He's one of those special talents where you say, you know what, we project him to be this for a long time, and we could focus our other assets that are not just money, maybe on the pitching market, because the Mets are old there. They just are. Senga's in his 30s. Manaya's in his 30s. Peterson's just turning 30. You look at, Frankie Montas, who we can get to that really quick. I would love to touch on that with you, being the former major league pitcher you are. And we spoke about this at the time. I didn't like the signing. I'm not saying he can't come back and be effective as a pitcher, but the guy, I looked at his injury log. I went over in one of my previous videos within the last week. He's had 3 shoulder injuries in the last 2 years. The hand, he's just a guy who can never stay healthy. And when you heard this, it's like almost expected. It's like, we know we're not going to get 30 starts, but how many can we get out of him? What are your thoughts on this situation? I just seen one of our comments from Klub here, who's one of our big contributors. Any chance the Mets could have a reunion potentially with Jose Quintana? Could you see something like that, or the Mets moving on? There seems to be conflicting reports in that field.
Yeah, I think for the time being, they're going to say that they're moving on. Again, there's no market right now for Quintana, but he's a guy also, as spring training goes on and somebody inevitably goes down, he's a guy that you can just plug in there and you know what you're going to get, the consistency you're going to get out of a pitcher like that, a major league veteran. He wants to sit at his number as well. He's not trying to get taken advantage of, but I do think his comfortability with the Mets and with the manager, they're both from Venezuela, and they had a great relationship while Carlos Mendoza's first year at the helm. Quintana was a guy who spoke very highly of him when nobody knew who he was. So I think that will play a role in it as well. I do believe, you got to pay double as you go over to that second, the Cohen tax. You have to pay double. So if you wind up giving him $12 million, it's really $24 million you're giving a guy for the 1 year deal. But I know this about Cohen and Stearns at this point. They're in it to win it. And I don't think that is necessarily going to hold them back. No matter what you say, the plan for Montas was to get him and continue enhancing his skill set, which is what he showed last year. The injury history always scared everyone, and it was a lot of money to throw at a guy who basically has not pitched a full season in quite some time. So there was trepidation about it, but I do think they felt the risk reward of it was 2 years, and I think there was an opt out, after the first one. So they kind of did what they did with Manaya and Severino. They kind of hoped that they would opt out, get the most out of them for 1 year, and then hope that they opt out and they, maybe go somewhere else, or, at that point you have a lot more options. So I think we see the lineup become a wow factor, but the pitching staff, especially in the starting rotation, there isn't that same wow factor. But again, if you look at through the years of the Milwaukee Brewers, there weren't many wow factors. They became pitchers. So Peralta, Burns, took off and became an ace. And then there was Woodruff, who was great until he got hurt as well. But I think that you have to have the confidence of what you saw last year, this team able to do with some guys who were coming off of some bad years. They had some bounce back years. And if they're being recognized as such, that means they have some information that they feel that they can tinker and get the best out of them. Manaya continues to grow. I watched him throw a few bullpens, and he's still working on grips. And there's a lot of information being exchanged. You got a guy like Holmes, who's coming in there with throwing a changeup and a cutter this year, adding to his repertoire. So he's not a one-trick pony so much of having to go fast for slider with everybody. So they have a lot of confidence in what this pitching lab can do for guys. The Montas thing is disappointing because there's no way you go all off season and your first bullpen, because you're not trying to make the team. You are on the team at that amount of money. So he should have been throwing a 60% bullpen. So not trying to air it out, not trying to hit 100 miles an hour with your fastball. So for a guy to have that much of a lat strain, that's really a concern for me, because like I said, if I know I'm in this situation and I have that money and I'm guaranteed to be on the team, I may have thrown enough to be ready for spring training, but I'm still building up, coming off the mound and not having to show off what I can do. So it was definitely a concern when I first heard the injury.
I wanted to talk about the back end of the rotation for a second too, because Montas goes down, and a lot of Mets fans, they're dealing with, we have to see McGill, we have to see Griffin Canning, and I'm not saying those guys are bad by any stretch, but I just wanted to get your opinion on the back end. Paul Blackburn too, a lot of good things you're hearing about him. Who do you think wins that sixth spot? Because with Senga, you do want to go to the 6-man rotation, I would imagine.
Yeah, and that's another thing. There's a knock on Senga saying he's always injured. He's not always injured. He had an injury from last year, and then he had the freak calf injury that happened. That's not something you can avoid. That wasn't because he was out of shape. He was actually dominating, and his problem was that he was going to go for his 10th strikeout on the night, and they left him in there. Normally, you would have figured, that was a great job. He shut down the Phillies, take him out of the game, and let's see him in 5 days. But he was in there. One pitch too many, as they say, on a pop-up running off the mound hurts his leg. So that has nothing to do with, he's damaged goods because of his arm or his, UCL or anything like that. So I have all the confidence in the world he's going to come back and pitch fantastic this year. Now the back end of the bullpen is the concern. Blackburn had something going on with his back that was of a major concern when he got shut down last year. Took care of it, and he's still building back up. He's the guy that I think they want to be that number 5. Tyler McGill has an option still, which is why they can kind of drop him down into AAA if need be and have him like the Joey Lucchesi of last year's team. And then you have, of course, Canning, who that's one that's still a head scratcher. It really is, because it's not often that you give up the most runs in baseball and the most home runs in baseball, and somebody offers you a big league deal. You usually have to go toil in the minors and prove that it was just a bad season, and you rework some things and change some things. But again, they see some spin rates, they see some things that he can do, and they feel he can optimize. And let's see how he goes through spring training. If we start seeing him being that same guy that got hit around pretty hard last year in spring training, then there's cause for concern. But you might see a different pitcher. You might see a guy who all of a sudden is getting some weak contact, and he has at least pitched 30 starts I think 2 out of the last 3 seasons, and that has some value in it.
One thing I wanted to address now, I know you've been down at camp for a while. I want to address some of the younger players, and one player that I'm very excited for this year. I always loved him as a prospect. I'm one of those guys who's obsessed with exit velo, and that's Ronnie Mauricio. There's a lot of people are all over the place. MLB Network talks about him being maybe a mid-season ad, an injury replacement to second base, third base, potentially even short. Maybe they give him a left field glove, some type. But I feel he has nothing more to prove at AAA. He hit in the 290s, projected to hit 35 home runs in an entire season. There's really nothing more to prove. Could he be the guy who sticks potentially over Acuna as a backup? Because I don't see Magical possibly making this team. The guy's, he's got a glove, but he can't hit it all. Could you see anywhere where Mauricio makes a team as, a super utility guy? He plays a little second, short, third, and maybe even DHs here or there, because it looks like they're going to be giving Brandon Nimmo a bunch of days off, DHing or even coming off the bench potentially because of the foot injury. What's your view on Mauricio? What do you see his potential? And let me know if there's any other prospects we should be keeping an eye on that impressed you down there.
Well, I mean, honestly, it was early in the players getting there. I was there for 2 days of them doing practices. So nothing is like, wow, jump off the page. You watch guys taking BP. Everybody looks unbelievable in BP. I actually gave compliment to the BP picture, Tucker, who came in as a defensive guy to help with shore up the defense. He was throwing BP against Soto, and he got him to pop up 3 times in a row in the cage. And I said, one of 2 things was going to happen there. He was either going to sign a long-term deal and actually be added to the roster, or he was going to get fired instantly for making Soto pop up 3 times in the cage. So it was. He said he felt it could have went either way. But back to Mauricio. Mauricio is the guy that they would love to have ready and available. He's still not 100% from the knee injury. He's still not all the way back. They haven't tested him out running bases. They haven't tested him out during a lot of the drills. He's been sitting out watching more so than participating. He has swung the bat. He has taken ground balls. So he's doing little things with kind of modified things. But until they can really let him, let it loose and run the bases and try and leg out a double, I don't think you're going to see him. And I think they're okay with that. They're patient with that. So that leaves the door open for somebody else like a Acuna. And, I think he's the guy that right now would stand out more so than Madrigal. I think Madrigal, I do believe he has an option still, Madrigal, and he can go back down. So I think he's just kind of extra. I think they learned their lesson last year with all the successes that they had. You remember there was Barry Short? It was
Joey Wendell.
Joey Wendell. There was also a Hauser. There was several things that they missed on. Everybody seems to forget that, and it was a perfect season. It really wasn't, but there was a little bit of trial and error, and they weren't afraid to turn the page quickly. That was something that had never happened before because of a fear of, this guy's making X number of dollars. We can't just get rid of him. This new Mets regime is like, no, that's why we're getting rid of him. Let's get him somewhere else. Let's bring up somebody else. Let's see what these other guys can do. So I think in that way, it's a little bit more refreshing that we're not going to see the same retreads over and over and over again. And you're going to see guys getting opportunities. Now, are these guys, have they perfected their craft as of yet? Not necessarily. Acuna, was struggling in AAA, and then kind of kicked it into another gear towards the end. 35 stolen bases is something that they could always use. Speed off the bench, and a guy who can play multiple positions, same kind of thing. So I think he right now is the guy that I would probably have as the backup infielder. Brett Beatty is probably going to start out in AAA again if he doesn't get traded, which is, thank goodness Soto got him that car now before, a couple weeks from now. But I think Brett Beatty
Lindor took months to steal his car.
I think Brett Beatty could be a very nice piece if you're looking to get a starting pitcher who's not just a fill-in. So we know that the Padres guys are been dangled around, and so Brett Beatty going over that way, but you have to remember they have Machado, so it's not like it's an enticing thing when you got another situation where he's going to probably go to AAA, but could be their third baseman of the future, or he might have to change positions. But I think he would be a piece that would be enticing enough to get a look at one of those two pitchers that would fit in nicely with the rest of this rotation. So, yeah, it's an exciting time because anything is possible still. I mean, they have depth. They're not panicked. They have 10 starters, and there's names that you haven't heard of yet. There's names that are guys, from parts unknown. I was one of those guys. I came off of pitching fantastic in Dominican Republic, and I was the 26th man. I got cut on the last day, and then 2 days later, I was in the big leagues when Pedro popped his groin. So anything can happen. I think that's the beautiful part, is that you go out there as a guy, a non-roster invitee, and you see how long you can last. It's like Survivor. Every Monday they give out the meal money, and you hope there's an envelope waiting for you as you walk through the door. And if you don't have that, you're going down, and you just want to make sure that you gave it your all, so that the team says, hey, we like the way this kid goes about his business. So it was fun to be there, and like I said, I think there's a lot of good arms, especially in the bullpen. Remember, Nunez is coming back. Budo is there.
Very excited for Nunez.
Yeah, those are two guys that you don't hear a lot of, but when they got Minter and they've got Stanek back, and say the Clay Holmes experiment for some reason fizzles out early, man, him having Clay Holmes in the 8th inning or alternating Diaz and Holmes so that closer's role is something you have utmost confidence in, that could be absolutely huge.
It's a good segue too. I wanted to quickly touch on Diaz. Looked like himself, stretches last year, but he wanted to feel like he was always itching for that 6-out save. Like they were using him sporadically. Like, how does that look usage-wise with Diaz this year and your expectations? Maybe a save number you have in mind or something?
I think he's back to the normal Diaz that we're used to. I think he's had a full year to work out some kinks. I think coming off of missing a full season, I noticed in his mechanics, he was just trying to do too much with his arms, being higher than his head. You can pinpoint it in video from 22, the difference between 22 and 24 in his mechanics. His hands never got above his bill of his hat. He was very compact and quick, where last year he was getting a little bit more elongated and longer with his arm action, and was late on his fastball and sliders. So he didn't have that same bite. Like his wipeout slider, when he throws it and it's on, is unhittable, and all of baseball knows it. He's a two-pitch pitcher. It's going to be a fastball and a slider, And he might throw you all sliders. He might throw you all fastballs. And his stuff is that electric that he can do so. From what I saw down in spring training, he's still working out some of the kinks, but he's working on his mechanics as well. And I saw him really focusing on not having his hands be so elevated, and getting comfortable with that again, because I think that'll be a huge key if he can get on top of that slider, like he has in the past. And then it's a no-brainer. He's still one of the best closers in all of baseball. And sometimes you have to go through adversity when you come off of a season like 22, where it was like, can't miss. I mean, the guy was just money every time out. And then you deal with, the injury and the uncertainty of, am I back? Am I not only back? And he didn't see triple digits until probably June. There was a little bit of panic in there, I'm sure. He felt like he was throwing the ball well and they just couldn't get that extra gear. And then after the suspension, after his little shoulder injury, he was able to come back strong. And that's when we started to see the uptick in velocity. And the second half of the season, he was fantastic. He had some moments like all closers do, where they like to load the bases and then strike out the side, but all's well that ends well, right?
Yeah.
Now, Fig, we have this from Kevin. I was thinking the same thing, because we got to be realistic where we were in that, that lower point in the season. Start off 0-5, you're 11 games under 500. This is from Kevin from Facebook. Shout out to Kevin. Figgy, how much of a concern do you have with Iglesias not being in the clubhouse after he brought some veteran leadership to the team last year and helped turn this season around? Thank you, Kevin, for that question.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. I mean, you're looking at two big guys, right? You're looking at Martinez and you're looking at Iglesias. And I think with the pieces that they brought in with a Juan Soto, we saw what kind of a leader he was in a Yankee uniform. Even though it was Judge's team, he commands respect. He commands attention. He takes away attention from a lot of the other guys, where they don't have to worry about certain things, because everything is going to be about Juan Soto for $765 million. So I think when you look at it that way, it's not that Iglesias was expendable by any means, but it's almost, remember the pitcher that they had, Aaron Loop? And when they had Loop and he had that sub-1 ERA season, and why didn't they sign him back? It wasn't that they didn't have the money. Why didn't they sign him back? Because it was impossible to duplicate, right? If he had a 3 ERA, which was his normal ERA, if he had a 3 ERA for the season, he was 3 times as bad as he was that season. And everybody would say, why would you bring this guy back? He's not the same pitcher. It's an impossible thing to duplicate. And so OMG, and Iglesias batting over 300 and batting near 400 with runners in scoring position for a guy who wasn't in the big leagues the year before. Right. How possible is it for him to duplicate all of that? The song, who knows? He could maybe make another song. But as you know, with movies, the sequel is never as good as the original.
Oh, that's for sure. We got this from Zach Latham. Nelson, is it me or Mets love? Ha ha ha. Is there a different body language with a few of the Mets this spring training? For me, Nimmo and Alvarez just seem different, more confident, beefier, and focused.
Yes, Nimmo definitely did beef up, and Jerry Blevins was giving him some gruff, pushing him around a little bit, because he used to be able to push him around because he was a tall, thin guy. He definitely bulked up. And I think Nimmo is falling in love with the potential to hit 30 home runs. He had 23 home runs and 90 RBIs, however, of which his on-base percentage was under 300. And that is the Brandon Nimmo that got the big contract. The big contract was for him to be the guy who set the table to get on. But when they take you out of that leadoff spot, now what is your identity? Well, he's always had decent power. I think he's trying to show them that he has really good power. And watching him down in BP, it was like the swing looked a little different. The swing looked stronger. The swing didn't look as flat, trying to hit the ball, the other way, kind of Brandon Nimmo style, put it in play and run a little bit. He looked like, rather than trying to beat out a ground ball, I'm just going to trot out a home run kind of thing. Even though he would run it, and, thank God the whole way. I think he's a guy that I look for him to have you say a bounce back year, but the guy hit 23 and 90. So for him to have a Brandon Nimmo-esque year, playing left field and knowing where he's going to, be positioned now. And I think Alvarez, he's the X factor for this whole thing. If Alvarez can be that 25 home run kid that he was in that first year and avoid the injury bug while playing almost every day, then you're going to see a very deep lineup because Alvarez will be batting somewhere seventh, eighth. You still have McNeil, who's a former batting champion that he dealt with injuries all last year. He had injuries coming into spring training. He hurt himself in spring training and really didn't get right. And then, of course, in the playoffs, he still had, injuries plaguing him. He said he feels 100%. Said he was able to swing the bat more than he did off season and even last season. He feels like can get back to that hitter that we thought he would be. And for him, it was when they stopped doing the shift. You thought this guy's going to bat 400. No shift. He's going to put the ball wherever he wants to. The thing about McNeil is he was always bat to ball skill was second to none. And he kind of lost some of that. And it's because the new game and the new, hey, be productive, a 2-run home run type deal is better than, a base hit. But you need guys to get on, especially with a lineup this deep and turning over that lineup and getting back to Lindor and getting back to Soto and putting the pressure on pitchers when you have guys who have, decent speed, being able to run a little bit and be more athletic. And that's one of the things that the Mets talked about was having that athleticism, like a Jose Siri at the bottom of the lineup who could steal 30 bags. Like, Tyrone Taylor, same thing. We saw a lot of good things from Tyrone. And I think that's one of the mantras of the New York Mets is, you don't have to do it by yourself. This isn't a one-man show, and that I think it's going to be a fun season because of the way everything had came together last year and the continuity going into this year because everybody has trust in one another.
Now, let me ask you this. For me, at least, and I understand the potential power of Jose Siri, his defensive capabilities, but if he replicates what he did last year, he's hitting in the low 180s, he's hitting a home run here or there. Is there going to be a shorter leash for him? You have now Drew Gilbert, who's 24 years old. So unless they're planning on moving him, he's going to be a center fielder. Or we heard last week from Carlos Mendoza, Jet Williams, who Dan and I have been calling for on this show for a long time. He's going to be the future center fielder. He's got the speed, he's got the legs, and from people that I've spoken to throughout the Mets organization, he is 100% the kind of player David Stearns loves. Really high on base, great eye at the plate like Soto. Yeah. Now, they think his bat's going to come along, but that's what he's really known for. Is there going to be a short leash on Siri? Or if he's hitting 175 4 weeks in, are they going to say, you know what? You're going to be a defensive replacement, steal a bunch of bags kind of guy because we got to get somebody in here that can hit a little bit. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, remember, you still have a guy like Marte who, although he's 36, 37 years old, he's built like a Greek god. And if he's injury-free, he can go out there and play center field, and you can, use his bat in the lineup against lefties especially, and that makes the lineup even deeper. There's a multitude of ways to put this puzzle together that I think Stearns and Mendoza and everyone that's involved is going to have a lot of fun with, because this is everything you'd hope for. I saw David Stearns down there, and you couldn't wipe the smile off that guy's face. He realizes what an offseason it was for the Mets. He realizes what it was like for the first time in his professional career to not have the brakes put on you and be told no at every turn. And even when it came to Pete, one of the things about Stearns' relationship with Pete was, he loves the player. Of course, he knows the person, and he also knows, the numbers are undeniable. It's not like he doesn't care about him. But at the same time, he didn't have any ties to him. He didn't draft him. He didn't, there's no, we have to have him. And so when your job as the baseball operations leader is to, president of baseball operations, you have to be able to explain everything to the ownership group and cover up the name, show the production, show the trend in which way it's going. And Steve Cohen's job is what? Hedge funds, forecasting, understanding how the market's moving. So he's speaking his language, and it makes it real easy to say, there's no reason for us to jump on the market at the very high point of what Boris wants. Let's play this out and see where it goes. And as the interest comes, we know Pete's going to always come back to us with, we're getting this number. This is the number we're getting. And I don't think Boris would play that game of not having an actual deal from somebody else and just trying to get him to, get them to jump on the number because of the deal he just did with Juan Soto. you want to have that for a long time. You know, that 15-year deal, a monkey could have got that done. I mean, Juan Soto is generational talent. Now, when it comes to Pete Alonso, and you told him you were going to make him the highest paid first baseman in all of baseball, he held his word. He got the $30 million that he wanted. Now, did it say for the rest of your career? No, he didn't say that. So I think that's where the David Stearns offseason and his leash with Series, what we were actually talking about, there's a multitude of things that can be done, and Siri will be given an opportunity. I mean, he has 25 home run power. He has that pizzazz. He has the swagger. He has all those things, and he plays an unbelievable center field. It's like a Juan Lagares type center field because he goes all out.
With
But
more
what do we know
speed.
about these guys? Yeah, what do we know about these guys that go all out? They run into walls and they dive and get hurt, and it happens all the time. So that's why you keep a guy like Tyrone Taylor around, who's a little bit more sensible with his body and still a fantastic player. So I think that's one of the things. The depth on this team is really, really good. It's all going to come down to starting pitching, especially in the first half of the season.
Another great segue, Nelson. You're teeing me up great tonight. The last one for me, we all want to see Brandon Sproat. We can kind of say that he's going to be called up this year, but I ask you, when? Is it going to be first half? Do you think second half? You know,
it's funny because nowadays it's, what we used to say in the minor leagues. It's the same game. It's the same mound. My part of the game, especially, is 60 feet, 6 inches. That doesn't change. The competition that I'm facing, these are guys that have to hit my stuff. So if my stuff is good enough in the minor leagues and I'm dominating against the best that I'm coming up against, then there's got to be a better level, right? And so keep pushing me. So you'll see him in spring training games. You'll see him show what he can do against big league talent, because you don't want to see him facing number 96 from the Cardinals. Those are guys that he's going to dominate, and all that does is put the media going, well, he hasn't given up a hit all of spring. Well, yeah, put him against the A squads. Send them on the road to pitch against the real teams. When they have their full team at home against the other guys that are sending on the road. But I think he is extremely talented. I think it's been a while since we've had the buzz about a kid like this. He has put up the numbers. He did struggle a little bit when he got bumped up last year. He struggled a little bit. That always happens. You're around new people, new regime. There's a lot of pressure because now you're the guy that everybody's watching, and it takes a little while to get adjusted. Even a new catcher, you work really well with one catcher where you don't have to think, and now all of a sudden you're overthinking. And that's the detriment of every athlete, is to have to think twice about anything. Then you start creating doubt. So I think he's going to be a fun prospect to watch. I'd say it's going to be later than sooner, because they're going to, with everything that they have already out there with the major league guys who've had major league experience, I think they'd want to see that, unless he's just absolutely Paul Skeens in it. If he's Paul Skeens in it, then it's like, all right, let's just bring him up, because then it's exciting, right? But then that's also, when do you bring him up? If the team is cruising along, you don't want to bring him up then. This team hit a little bit of a rough patch, and then it's like, what? Let's bring the kid up and bring the energy up another level. So I think that's what you're looking at when you have a president of baseball operations involved, not just a GM, but you have a guy that has to worry about the everyday, and then you have a guy who's worrying about the long term. David Stearns is worried more about the long term and the sustainable success of this franchise, because now you have a superstar like Juan Soto for 15 years. You don't want to put out Juan Soto and a bag of balls. So I think that's the thing that they're looking to do, is not only compete with the team that they have now and the superstars that they have now, but then have that next generation being comfortable enough, having enough reps and being around all those guys in spring training enough, so that there's that, familiarity, that when they make the leap, this isn't oh my God, look who I'm sitting next to Lindor. No, Jet Williams plays basketball with Lindor every morning at spring training. They're hooping it up and talking smack. And so I think that's one of the things that Lindor is great in the clubhouse. I think if there is a captainship, it will be him. And the great part is that Soto couldn't care less if that's the case, because Lindor has definitely earned it. And whatever happens from there, but I do think that it is something that's undeniable. You feel it, like the way everybody looks at Lindor, talks about Lindor, and whenever he's around in a room, he just commands that respect and that attention, similar to what you see with Aaron Judge.
All right, Nelson, thanks so much for giving us your time, my guy. We'll have you on again shortly. Thank you so much, guys. We're going to stick around and break down everything we just spoke about. Feel free to bring your comments, concerns. If you enjoyed this segment, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, as we have guests pretty much every Thursday night. Nelson's just part of the great crew. Nelson, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Thank you, Nelson.
You got it, boys. Have a good night.
You too.
You too.
So that's what we have from Nelson Figueroa. I just want to let you guys know that segment was brought to you by our friends over at Homage. They just released their new Mets retro jacket, which looks absolutely sick. I placed an order for mine. I know they're limited edition, so I left our exclusive link in the description below if you guys want to check that out. But Dan, what do you take away from that whole interview?
That was good. A lot of great stuff. The whole thing about Diaz, his arm slot. That's why Nelson gets paid the big bucks. He's going a little bit deeper than we are. But honestly, yeah, that's the stuff we got to start unlocking. And that's good to see that. Bring him in, hear the perspective. The whole thing on Sproat, too, more later than sooner. I'm more sooner than later, but I trust Nelson on this one. It'll probably be the second half we see him. But, yeah, great talk, Ray. Great talk.
Yeah, he gives you that interesting player-type perspective where it's like, okay, I didn't think about it like that. Like, I would have thought Mauricio, if he shows, I know people say he was behind in his rehab, but that was back in December. I still think there's a possibility that if he shows out in camp, he's 24. He's done everything. Him and Brett Beatty. Don't forget, Brett Beatty was on the taxi squad last year. He's we'll see if everybody comes out of camp healthy. Odds are someone's going to go down with something. We already saw Montas go down, but it just goes to show you the depth of this organization. I don't remember being a Met fan over the last, I want to say 15 years or so, where you look at a team and say, you know what? The Mets have a bunch of guys who could probably come up now and start on a bunch of major league teams. Like, I truly think Drew Gilbert at 24, he could come up and play for several major league teams. I think Brett Beatty could be a starting third baseman for probably 7 or 8 teams in Major League Baseball. And I think the same with Ronnie Mauricio. He could be a starting third or second baseman for a lot of teams. That exit velo, that's not made up. Between Beatty and Mauricio, I actually think there's a good chance Beatty's going to be more relaxed this year. You saw the pressure on his face last year. He came up, he had a tiny bit of success right away, then he failed. I feel like when he came back up the second time after tearing it up in AAA, he almost had that pressure like, if I don't perform right now, I'm out of here. Like, they got to either give him a leash or they got to get rid of him. And I would prefer to give him a leash or trade him for a starting pitcher, but give him the leash first. And I know I'm sorry I didn't get to so many of your guys' comments. The conversation was flowing. Our time's a little limited with Nelson, but I saw somebody commenting about the Mets starting rotation. I'll get your thoughts on it. I think obviously that's their weak point right now. And don't forget this, and I don't know if this is going to play into a factor. I didn't want to put Nelson on the spot in regard to Steve Cohen's comments about the attendance. What is one thing, Dan? One thing that guarantees attendance boost? The young stud pitcher. We saw it with Christian Scott last year. He's not nearly as highly touted as a Brandon Sproat is, but the secondary was like, he's pitched. I got to go to Citi Field and see him. I was one of those guys. And then if they have 1 or 2 good starts, I mean, look what Paul Skeens is doing for the Pirates. I'm not expecting him to do that kind of thing, but when you talk about attendance, you look at the rotation last year, the Mets had a lot of 30-year-old guys, the Severinos, the Quintanas, the Manais. Nobody excited you going into the season. You want to excite this fan base? I'm not saying you have to do it right away, but if he's lighting AAA up and it's mid-May, maybe you bring him up. Let him play a Thursday game when the place is half empty, and then all of a sudden it's going to fill up. You want to talk about attendance? But that was always my thing. Winning breeds higher attendance. And it's almost like Steve Cohen's in a rebuild with the fan base. And I know I'm giving you a lot right here, but the Wilpons did so much damage to this fan base where I'll never forget we had Cespedes, and what did Jeff Wilpon say? I couldn't imagine any major league team having 3 $30 million a year players on it, or 2. I mean, now we have Lindor. You got Soto making 50 and Pete Alonso. So I feel like there's a lot of that reputation that's got to be molded out. And obviously, people compare us to the Yankees all the time. They have 43,000, way more than us, but they have that tourism. that winning. They're in the playoffs literally every single year. And most of the time, Cohen's owed this team, we've been in the playoffs, but it's slowly developing. You got to get that younger generation that wants to go to games. There's so many fans that have been damaged by poor ownership in the past that haven't yet fully recovered. And I feel like this will be the season where it's like, and I'm going to bring up this video after your comments. I posted a video earlier today, Brandon Tierney, and what he said about the team last year and Steve Cohen. And I feel there were several fans, I remember listening to that segment, that were dogging on Steve Cohen in this ownership group and David Stearns with him at that time, which was not necessary. But we'll bring it up. The floor is yours.
Yeah. A lot of things there, Ray. First thing with Beatty, it's nice to see the position versatility, trying second one day, trying first base one day. But then you hear it from Nelson, too. He's thinking what we're thinking. Just trade the kid. He got his car. We like Brett Beatty. I don't want to make it seem like we're just dogging on Brett Beatty, but we know what he is. And give him one more chance, right? If you option him down to begin the year, you can option him back up whenever you want. Maybe we see Beatty around for another year. But given that Vientos is so good, given that Mauricio is coming up, there's no path for him long-term. So that's what I'm worried about with him. Brandon Sproat, very interesting. Yeah, he can energize the team right away. But I think what Nelson said, too, at the point, the Mets, they kind of have to be losing, too. They can't be winning, and then we just call up Sproat. That's the ideal, of course. But it kind of
maybe an injury. I don't know.
Well, injuries, but it also both has to happen at once. Either the Mets are really bad and Sproat's really good. Okay, that makes sense. Call them up. But if the Mets are really good and Sproat's really bad, then obviously you're not calling them up. But if it both happens at the same time where it's like they're both looking good, I think I weigh on the side of Nelson where it's like, all right, we might just wait till the second half, maybe even a playoff push, September call up Brandon Sproat. I know it sounds crazy, but he's going to be up this year. We just don't know when. And then the whole thing with the attendance, yeah, I don't know what the Mets are going to do. Parking, we saw Tim Healy's Newsday had a thing. Went from 40 to 25 for season ticket holders. That's great.
That's a great perk. But I mean,
but for season ticket holders, that's
right.
like 5% of the fan base. So it's just, I have my own problems with the attendance because people in Eastern Long Island to get a train back home is absolutely brutal.
Dude, I did it during the playoffs, and I kid you not, after the game was over, it took me 3 hours to get home. And I said, I'm never doing that again. But then again, you're going to pay. It was even more expensive. I forgot what I paid for parking for the Phillies series. I forgot, but
it's probably way more, honestly.
Yeah, it was something. But I feel like, and I tweeted this out, and it wasn't at Steve Cohen. I love Steve Cohen. Steve Cohen follows us. I'm never going to dog on him, guys. It's not happening. But I'll keep it real with you. I'm never going to dog on him unnecessarily.
Yeah.
Having something like a family plan, what I was talking about, have it where it's 4 tickets, 4 hot dogs, and parking for $100. And I say this, and I know, because Dan, I'm not gonna lie, I get a ton of people who are messaging me after that, complaining about the ticket prices. And maybe you make it where it's, they did that last year. I'm trying to remember, was it Tuesday through Thursday games? They lowered the parking prices because people feel they're paying for another ticket. I don't want to make this about the ticket prices, but I know a lot of people wanted
to. It's a big concern. Right? It is.
And I mean, like StubHub on the second game right now, you can get in for like $20. Parking's more than your ticket. That shouldn't be the case, especially for us coming from out east. I'm driving an hour and a half. I mean, I've never complained about paying the prices, but that's just because I'm nuts like that. I'm telling you that the casual guy who wants to take his family, and that might be me because I have a daughter now and my wife's going to come with us. So it's like, it's something that should be addressed. I feel like they should be doing more bundles where parking's included, or you get 1 parking pass if you buy 4 tickets, something like that. You could even, up the price of the tickets $5 to get $20 for parking, or you get discounted parking. I understand stuff with the season ticket holders, but you're not worried about the season ticket holders. They want to get the casual fan in there. They want to get the new person who was just introduced to baseball. And I feel like there's a lot more different things the Mets could be trying to do.
Even if you want people to come in too from like different states and stuff, do something through Delta. LaGuardia is right there. There's like so many different ideas that I've thought about a lot, honestly, Ray, if we're going to be honest. Like they got to get more people at Citi Field. Yankee Stadium's averaging 35,000 a year. I know they're the Yankees. They built up the brand. The Mets still have to do that, but hopefully that changes this year. I really hope so.
Well, it's the excitement, but I want to get to this video really quickly. Not sure if Dan's a fan of it, but whatever.
BT.
Yeah. I want to get to this because this got sent to my DM and I feel like I had to post it today. Here is this from last year. Let me shrink this a little bit. It's just BT's face. This is from last year, and this is something that I spoke to a few people off the air about. Feel free to give us let me know in the comments what you think about this video. Guys, again, if you're enjoying this, head over to YouTube, give us that like, subscribe. I mean, if you're watching this long and you ain't subscribed, what are you doing, bro? No. Well, let's give it a listen.
Steve Cohen is simply not who or what you thought he would be or what he would represent. All I heard, and by the way, I believed it, and I was hoping that this would happen. It would have been great for New York. The first thing, the second thing, and the third thing, we were fed up and down. He's going to reel in every or at least some big free agents. Got none. All right. The one guy that he brought in and gave a ridiculous contract to is basically half washed, as I said.
That was Verlander.
And here's the other thing, and this worries me. All right. The other day, Sal, when Steve Cohen said that the Mets are a playoff team, tells me that he has no clue what he's watching. Steve Cohen is a problem. This is not year 1. This is not year 2. This is not year 3. This is year 4. And let everybody understand the direction the Mets are going in. They're not even incrementally inching forward, which would be even still almost unacceptable than year 4. They're going Steve Cohen.
Go ahead, Dan. Initial thoughts.
Was that today?
No, it was. This was early on last season, before everything turned around, when Steve Cohen, remember, we were down. He came out and said, I still think we're a playoff team. We got to fix a couple of things. And they actually did that. And he just dogged all over them, which,
The Mets, we have that problem. We have to win. And until we win, we're always going to be looked at as the LOL Mets. And I hate to say it, but everyone who's a Mets fan knows it's true. When we win a World Series, it's going to be the best day on God's green earth because the curse will be broken. But until then, I mean, I get it. 99 was tough. 2000 was tough. 06 was tough. 2015, 2016 was tough. 2022 was tough. And even 24. But I think we're building now. And I look back at that video of BT and it's just like, I think he wouldn't say that again. I think he would take that back and say the Mets have really built up bigger than
I agree.
Fans could have even imagined.
So we have this from Richard. I know this won't happen again, but allow people to bring their own food in again. I'm pretty sure as long as it's sealed in a clear plastic bag, you are allowed to bring in your own food.
I think you are.
I'm pretty sure about that. I haven't tried it in a while. I'm pretty sure you can. Got this from Klub. I don't mind the prices. I drive 5 hours one way from Vermont. Last year, I went to game 5 of the NLCS, and it was amazing. I'll be making a few trips this coming season. That's good. You know what it is? I'm also thinking about the younger person too. Like, concessions are very expensive. I'm pretty sure you can still bring. I might be wrong, but I might be wrong. I'm not too sure about that. I wanted to also address a video that I saw. I'm not going to pull it up right here, but did you see the video of Brandon Nimmo running and doing the relays in the outfield today? I actually think he looked pretty good.
Yeah.
It's just we don't know what he's looking like after that session's over. Is the ice in his foot? Is his foot swelling up? Like we don't get that in-depth look afterwards. Yeah.
I'm interested to see. He was at 91% the last time he said a number in terms of how he's recovering. So maybe he's at like 97%. He's not feeling it as much. Yeah.
Would you bring in Quintana back?
I would. I mean, absolutely. I think we need a lefty. I think he can be in the bullpen. He's a great arm. He has experience. I just don't know with the Mets mentality, given they have depth and they trust the depth.
Right.
If they were saying, we don't know how we're feeling with some of these guys, we want to give them more opportunities. They kind of know that McGill's a great starter. They know Canning is what he is. And I think Blackburn, to Nelson's point, seen a lot of headlines recently about Blackburn. I think he's going to be the 6th starter.
Another guy who can't stay healthy. Was really one thing that was really interesting what he said about the Griffin Canning. Like that was a head scratch. That's one thing I love about Nelson when we talk. He's always just blatantly honest with us. He's like, that's a head scratcher. I mean, think about this. Between Montas and Canning, they're making what? 17, 18, 19, 20, 22 million between the two of them this season alone. I don't know. I never understood it, but I could be wrong. That's why I'm being patient when it comes to David Stearns. You know what I mean?
93.5%. Zach, thank you, Zach. So it's going up. It's going up. We're almost at 100 for Nimmo. And I love that Nelson said, give him a 30 home run season. He's itching for it. We've been clamoring for that, Ray. 16 home runs in the first half last year. Let's go have a 30 home run season, Nimmo. Let's go. Go steal 20 bags. Go be a great player, 5.5 WAR player. Like, let's go.
Yeah, I think it's a possibility for him. I would take the prediction I saw earlier today. It was 25 and 100, especially if he's going to be in that 5 or 6 hole. But guys, that's what we have for you today. I want to shout out Nelson Figueroa. Thanks so much for coming on today. I'm sure he'll be on shortly again. We'll be bringing you guys all the latest Mets content as always. If you're not yet, please like and subscribe. Leave a comment below. Let us know your thoughts on the video. Name somebody who you like for us to get on the podcast as a guest. We'll be sure to bring you everything. But any last words, Stan?
Hell yeah, Ray. Whenever I get this camera set up, we'll have new video, I guess, on my end. So that's pretty good. But yeah, this was great, Ray. Great talking to you. Great talking to Nelson. We'll do it again next Thursday.
All right, everybody. As always, let's go Mets. Peace.